Hey everybody, thanks for joining White Dog Outdoors. I'm going to be retying my Euro Nymphing Leaders today. I've had them on for way too long. They're getting really bad. And not only that, but the fly line is really getting eaten up. So I got two rods, two reels that I use when I'm Euro Nymphing. And I'm going to replace both of the Euro Nymphing leaders that are on these rods. Now these leaders basically follow my formula in our leaders section of our Euro Nymphing series. I'm going to alter things a little bit. And here's what I'm going to do. On my ESN, my really primary rod, I'm going to go with more of a micro leader. And when I do that, I'm going to go down to lighter lines. I'm going to be using a 12-pound main line, and I'll be using 10-pound cider material. Whereas on my other rod, it's more my the rod that I guide with, so I don't use it that often. It's usually other people that use it. So for that one, I'm going to stick to more with what I have now, which is going to be a 15-pound mainline leader and a little bit heavier 15-pound on the cider material. It's just going to be a little bit easier for other people to use that way. You know, I go into my leaders and micro leaders and why you want to use one versus the other and the formulas in my Euro Nymphing series, so check that out. I'll link that down below. But why don't we get into actually tying these leaders? I'll show you kind of what these things look like right now. I'm going to start with my ESN because this is the one I'm really interested in. All right, so the first thing to know, I'm going to strip off everything that's in here. All right, and so this is all my cider material and then my main line. And I basically have about 12 feet of main line to about 4 feet of cider material. What I want to show you guys is this line is super beat up. It is just torn to pieces. Even the fly line, the coating's coming off. It's terrible. I'm actually going to cut this back quite a ways, because what happens is as that line gets used inside your rod, and it's hitting those rod guides all the time, it's getting beat up in there. So I'm basically back. I've cut off a bunch here. I'm going to cut off, just feeling it out and seeing where I start to feel some of that worn out stuff. I'm going to select a portion right here, and I'm just going to cut it right off. And you're probably thinking, oh my God, you just cut off half your fly line. With Euro Nymphing, it really does not matter at all if I'm cutting off my fly line. All right, I'm going to get rid of all of this line, set it off to the side, and we're going to start fresh. All right, so like I said, when I'm using my micro leader, I'm going to be using 12-pound main line. Now, one of the reasons I'm really changing things up is that I really disliked the way the line was getting stuck in my rod guides. And the line, the loop knot that I would tie from the fly line to the actual main line of my leader, it just wasn't cutting it. And not only that, as my line got frayed, it was just getting more and more stuck in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do more of a mono rig. I'm not going to go full mono rig. I'm still going to have my fly line, but I'm going to use a much longer section of the main line for my Maxima Chameleon. So the Maxima Chameleon, again, is just it's a stiff monofilament section. You guys aren't going to be able to see this with the brown. Let me do the gray. I brought to gray. There we go. You're gonna be able to see that maybe a little bit better, maybe. And what I'm going to do is, before I had about 12 feet of my main line leader, what I'm going to do is I want to keep my fly line on my reel, and I'm basically just going to have this monofilament line be my line that's going to be in my rod guides at all times. Okay, so we're going to put on a significant section. So I'm going to do close to 30 feet, I think. So I'm going to do one arm length is 6, 12, 18, yeah, I know, 24, 30. So I'm going to cut off about 30 feet of my line here. All right. So this one end of this is going to tie onto my Euro Nymphing fly line, and I'm going to have a really long section that's going to tie onto my cider material. So get all the way to the other end here, I want to show you guys the knot that I'm going to tie. This is basically going to be a Uni-Uni knot. That's how I'm going to tie my leaders, is with a Uni-Uni knot. So all of my sections of leaders are going to go together in that way. Now, if you saw in my video, my high-visibility cider section, I would go a foot of yellow, a foot of red, a foot of yellow, a foot of red. I'm going to shorten that a little bit. So I had a total of 4 feet. What I found is that sometimes when I'm fishing a little bit shorter line, I'm fishing right in front of me, I'm fishing small water on my knees, sometimes that high visibility cider is into my rod guides, and it affects my casting a little bit. The knots get stuck in the guides. I'm going to shorten that down a little bit by about a foot. So I'm going to go 3 sections. I'm going to go yellow, then red, and then yellow. So that's how I'm going to tie this. So my first section here is going to be about a foot of the yellow, 10-pound amnesia. And again, this is more my micro leader formula. Yeah, look how bright that is. You got to love that stuff. I'm going to cut off a little bit more than I need just so I have room for my knots. Get out of there. Oh my gosh, get out of there. All right, so we're going to cut off a little section of this. We're going to take the end of my leader. We're going to do a Uni-Uni knot. So basically what that means is you take the pieces and you basically kind of cross them opposite ends. Okay, I'm going to take this one. So with a high visibility cider, I'm going to make a little bit of a loop, and then through that loop I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to pull that tight. I'm going to create a little bit of a knot. Okay, I got that little knot here. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to swap this over. I'm going to take my Maxima Chameleon and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a loop, and I'm going to go through once, twice, get down there, 3 times, and I'm going to pull that tight into a knot. Now I've got these 2 knots, and when I pull them tight, I'm going to pull them together just like that, and when they get together, they're really going to tighten up. And that is a really strong knot. Okay, I'm going to clip these tag ends all the way down. You guys saw in my other video, if you leave these tag ends, sometimes they can be used as a little bit of a cider, extra cider. I find they just get in the way. So I will be cutting that off, and I will be cutting this off as close as I can. And there we go, my tag ends are done. I've gone from my Maxima Chameleon down to my first section of cider material, and again I want that to be about a foot. Okay, so I've got enough over here that I can overlap to my next piece. Okay, now we're going to take our 10-pound red amnesia, we're going to pull off about an 18-inch section here just so I have room to tie my knots. Okay, this amnesia is not quite as bright as the last amnesia I had. You can see there's quite a bit of difference, so it's going to be very interesting to see if this works as well as I want it to. That was the better color, but this is much heavier. This is 15 pounds, so I don't know why they changed colors on me, but they did. So I'm hoping that in the sunlight this is going to show up, but if I don't like it, all I'll do is I'll simply cut that section out and I'll replace it with something a little bit brighter. Okay, we're going to do the same Uni-Uni knot. 1, 2, 3. Pull that tight, swap it over. Take my yellow, maybe. Take my yellow, do the loop. Come on. All right, we're gonna go 1. Let's get that back. I like to make sure I keep control of this as I'm doing it. 2 and 3. Okay, we got our 2 knots again. Pull those together, nice and tight, nice and strong. And again, we're going to clip these down. Clip off my tag ends. And those guys are gone. And then we're going to go to one last section of my high visibility yellow. So let's pull off another 18 inches or so here. Cut it off. Oh, hey buddy, be good. Cut it off. We're going to do another Uni-Uni. Trying to make sure that I have about a foot in between. Okay, make our loop. Go through 3 times. Grab my tag end, pull here, get my initial knot. Now that red is about a foot long there, but if I tie it too much toward the end, it's going to make it a little bit longer. So I'm going to attempt to make that one a little bit closer. Let me start over, kind of messed that up. Got our loop through once, through twice, through 3 times. I'm going to pull this a little bit closer this time just so I don't get too long of a piece on the red. Again, I'm going to pull these tight, and I got it. All right, so my cider section is done, and honestly my leader at this point is pretty well done. I'm going to take a tippet ring, so I'm going to cut these off again, cut my tags, got those tags cut off, and I got about 30 feet of main line. I have about a foot of high visibility yellow, a foot of high visibility red, and a foot of high visibility yellow that's going to go to a tippet ring. And then from that tippet ring is where I'll take and tie my tippet. And that's going to follow the same formula that I use on a regular basis that's in my Euro Nymphing series. But essentially it's usually about 5 or 6 feet or so of anywhere from 4 to 6x tippet depending on conditions, but typically 5x. And I'm usually going to be tying a double nymph rig there. So usually about 6 feet from the tippet ring down to that last nymph. And I'm going to resurrect the tippet ring from my old leader here because there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So here's a little trick. I've still got my tippet ring on my old leader. I just took my tippet portion off of it. Tippet rings are really kind of difficult to work with because they're really small. And so what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to take this new 10-pound and I'm going to put it through and I'm going to tie a clinch knot onto that, and then I can remove it from the old leader. That way I'm not struggling trying to tie a little tiny tippet ring onto something that is really, really tiny. Okay. Now for this one, I'm going to tie a couple loops here. All right. And go through the first one. I'm going to wet this one. All right, try to cinch that down nice and good. Try to make sure I got a nice good knot here. That's good. I'm going to clip my tag end again as close as I can, and then I'll clip off the old cider material so that I can go straight to my tippet. Okay, so now I have my new leader built. I have 30 feet or so of the main line. I have about 3 feet. It's actually a little bit longer than 3 feet. I probably got 3.5 feet of cider material. That's okay. I can always cut these back if I want. I can always cut them back, but I can't add to them as easily. So I got my leader pretty much ready to go. Now I just have to connect it to my reel. All right, so now that we have our leader tied, we have to attach it to the fly line. And one of the things that has been annoying me the absolute most lately is that the big knot, the loop-to-loop of the fly line to my leader has been so annoying. It keeps getting stuck in my guides like crazy. And I know I'm going to minimize that by using the really long section of the main line of my leader, but I still want a really smooth transition. Let's say I get a big fish and it starts ripping line. When that goes out, I don't want it going click, 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 click and getting stuck. I want a nice smooth transition. So I'm stealing a method from Devin Olson at Tactical Fly Fishing, and I've made my first one here. It came out really well, but it's essentially a micro loop, is what he calls it. And so this is going to slide through my guides a lot smoother than my big knots that I have now with my loop-to-loop connection. So I've tied my first one as a practice. I'm going to show you guys basically how I did this. And if you want, Devin Olson's the master. He really came up with this. Go check out, he's got a video there. He's actually got a few videos on how to do different connections. This is the one I think I'm going to go with. This is the micro loop. So we're essentially going to take this braided core fly line. This is a Rio Euro Nymph fly line. We're going to pull off the plastic to expose the braid. Okay, so what we're going to do is take a piece of high visibility cider. This is just 3X high visibility cider material. It's a Rio two-tone indicator. We're going to stick it behind the fly line, and we're going to take the 2 tag ends and we're going to go through the loop and get those to cinch down on the fly line. I'm gonna tighten those up a little bit, slide it down to where I want this to be, maybe a couple inches from the end, tighten it down, and we're essentially just gonna pull, and it's gonna strip off the fly line material and expose the braided core. So voila, that part's done. Now, we're going to put a pretty stout gauge hook in a vise, barbless hook so we can slide it off later, but we're essentially just going to like wrap it around here so that I have mostly the braided core. And what we're going to do is we're actually just going to use thread wraps. And let me just pinch in the thread. And I want to get a little bit closer on this. I want to get as close as I can on this. Okay. Start wrapping my thread wraps here. And what we're doing is we're basically just creating a loop. And we're going to try to secure these together here. I got too much thread out. I want to keep them fairly tight when I do this so I can keep them cinched together. I'm going to go over these, try to keep them as tight as I can. Don't want too many wraps on here because we don't want to make it bulky, but at the same time I want to cinch it down good. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Alright, now what we want to do is we want to get rid of some of our tag ends. We got to get rid of the tag end for the thread. We want to get rid of the tag end for the braid. Get out of there. Alright, we're going to snip that down as close as we can. Okay, get these untangled. This is a little tricky when you're doing it, to be completely honest. Like, it's not easy to do. Let's move you over here so you're not in the way. All right, we want to try to secure these down. Cover up the loose material there. Keep putting too much thread out. Just want to cover these loose ends because we don't want anything catching as we're casting these. So we want to make sure we're tying those ends in. Get in there. Yeah, it would be great if I could keep that tight when I was doing it. Oh, I keep bumping you out of focus. Sorry, guys. All right. All right, now this is a tricky part. We have to basically figure out how we're going to tie this off and finish it without messing up everything that we just did. And I can tell you from the couple times that I've done this so far, this is the tricky part. So we're going to go back to this high visibility cider material again. We're going to make a loop again, and we're going to lay it basically right along our fly line here. Okay, so we got all these laying out together. Okay, now what we want to do In order to whip finish, we have to make several wraps around and then pull one through. So that's why we created this loop that's in my right hand right here. So we're going to do our best to loop these in. We're going to wrap around 3, maybe 4 times. And then this is where it gets tricky. I'm going to hold this for right now. We're going to cut the thread out. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to cut the thread out. My bobbin is now loose. Okay? And we're going to take this, we're going to take the tag end of the thread and we're going to feed it through the loop. Okay? And now we're going to pull that tag end through just like that, and I'm going to cinch it down just like this. I pulled pretty tight. I did break the thread, but I pulled pretty tight on that. And that's my loop right there. Now, what he does to finish this, we're going to take a little bit of super glue and we're going to cover this in super glue right up into that braid. That way it's going to hold everything nice and tight. Essentially, I'm just going to put a little bit of super glue on this. So I've got a little bit of a super glue that's a brush on super glue that, not too much here, but let's just dab this. I don't want it to be gooey. Wow, that's a lot. Okay, I got a little too much there. So let's just try not to super glue our hands together, but there we go. All right, we've added the super glue to my hands too, but the super glue's on. So that's making this, it's soaking it in and making it nice and sturdy. So now that I have that set, I'm going to let that dry for just another few seconds. And once I have that set, I'll tie in my leader and we will be set to go. All right, rock solid. Rock solid. Now if I pull on this, I'm pulling on this with some pretty good force and it is not coming loose. So we did a good job. All right, so there's my micro loop. Take it out of here. You guys can see it. It's nice and dry. It's very solid. It's all super glued shut. And it's gonna slide through my guide super easy. Anyway, I'm gonna be in good shape now. I'm gonna tie this on with a clinch knot, which is gonna be super easy. So we'll take the tag end, the butt end, I should say, of our Euro Nymphing leader. And this is the 30-foot mainline section I made earlier. I'm going to basically slide it through this loop. And I'm going to tie a simple clinch knot. Sorry. Even at 12-pound test, this is very stiff material. That's why we like the Amnesia, or the Maxima Chameleon. So I'm going to put several twists in this. This is just a clinch knot where I put some twists in it and I go in through the first loop. I'll wet that down with my mouth. I'm going to attempt to pull this nice and tight. And that is really good. And then I want to cut this tag end. If you can see that, let me get this out of the way. I'm going to cut this tag end all the way down as far as I can. And now that is going to slide through my guides super easy, and I'm super happy with this. So that's my new Euro Nymphing leader and micro loop setup. And I got to tell you guys, I recorded this a few weeks ago and I've been out fishing with this new leader setup a couple of times and I am absolutely loving it. It's so much smoother on my rod guides. My casting is more accurate, it's more effective. It's really light. I like the more micro leader type setup. I've got the sensitivity, it's really light. I've been able to cast really long distances and connect with some fish, so I'm totally liking it for that. And I've hooked into a couple of big fish where they've peeled out some line, and I've had that micro loop go through my rod guides and it slid right through. It was very smooth. I didn't even really know it was going through. So doing exactly what I wanted it to do. So hopefully you guys like that leader formula. The one thing that didn't work out is that red Amnesia and the 10-pound. It's just not bright enough. They changed the colors up on me, so I'm going to cut that section out, put in some sort of other material. I like to have two colors. I like to have that high fluorescent yellow, and I like to have a red for different lighting conditions. So I'm probably going to go back to my 15-pound Amnesia in red, just because it's the perfect color. But anyway, I'm really liking the entire setup. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I know that we've had a few people asking me to do this particular video when I retie my leaders. And so hopefully it helped you guys. But we've got a lot more Euro Nymphing content coming your way. I made a trip to the Au Sable, so I recorded some of that. And I've got a couple of how-tos, a little breaking down water and a few different things. We got the fly selection video coming. Definitely different things that we've already recorded for a lot of it, and I just need to put in some editing time. So more coming your way. If you guys like what we're doing, definitely subscribe, and we will see you all soon.